We're going to move on now to the home, so from the industrial to the domestic. Our next guest is all too familiar with in the halls of Web Summit. His journey began here not so long ago as a start-up full of ambition. SmartThings first launched on Kickstarter, raising 1.2 million in funds. Since then, SmartThings have built something which Samsung simply couldn't refuse. I must say it's a very cool company. It offers accessibility, connecting your phone to just an amazing array of gadgets. It can monitor anything from when your kids come home from school, setting rules to turn off your lights, and even brewing your coffee in the morning. I think Jeff, my Irish mammy, has been waiting for you all her life. So here to tell us where their journey is going next, would you please welcome to the stage Jeff Hagins, CTO and co-founder of SmartThings.
Thank you. Good morning. So I'm going to talk a bit this morning about the smart home and defining what the smart home really means. First, though, I want to take a minute to talk about this term, the Internet of Things. So I've spent the last few years now working in this field that we call the Internet of Things, and I have to say that without uncertainty, that I really, really hate this term. Right? I mean, after all, we don't call it the Internet of Information Access, or the Internet of digitized social relationships, or the Internet of mobile communications, but for some reason we decided to call it the Internet of Things. And even if we did call it by those other names, at least they're functional descriptions, right? This actually doesn't tell me anything about the use case. And I was wondering the other day about what other people defined the Internet of Things as. And I went to the Oxford English Dictionary and was pleased and ultimately dismayed to find this definition: a proposed development of the Internet in which everyday objects have network connectivity, allowing them to send and receive data. And I wondered, what kinds of objects connect to the Internet that don't send and receive data, right? And then they went on to use the term in a sentence, right, to illustrate what it means. If one thing can prevent the Internet of Things from transforming the way in which we live and work, it will be a breakdown in security. And I thought, well, that's really useful for my business, right, to point out that the most important thing to worry about is a failure in security. But at least they acknowledge that it does have the potential to transform the way in which we live and work. But it got me to wondering about this term, which is a little bit closer to what we do at SmartThings, the smart home, and wondering how people define smart home. So naturally, I went and looked that up as well, and here's what I found: a home equipped with lighting, heating, and electronic devices that can be controlled remotely by a phone or computer. So apparently a smart home just means remote control. Well, that wasn't very satisfying, because we certainly have a different definition of that. They also used it in a sentence. You can contact your smart home on the Internet to make sure that dinner is cooked, the central heating is on, the curtains are drawn, and the gas fire is roaring in the grate when you get home. And similarly, it didn't really do much for me in terms of this definition of what a smart home means, because it defined an end state, but it didn't tell us how we got there. And I thought, well, let's define it. You know, maybe it's time to actually put a better definition behind smart home. And I kept digging. I decided to look at the word smart and see what it meant. And it says, having or showing a quick-witted intelligence. And once again, it didn't tell me a whole lot. Quick-witted. What does that mean? So I kept digging. Quick-witted. Showing or characterized by an ability to think or respond quickly or effectively. And I thought, oh, now we're getting somewhere, right? If I can respond, if my home can respond quickly and effectively, that has some specific meaning. Except, what does respond mean? So I looked up respond. Respond is to say something in reply, right, or to react to a stimulus. And I thought, oh, this is also interesting, right? This tells me something about what a smart home should be able to do. It should be able to communicate. It should be able to talk to me and tell me what's going on. And it should be able to react to a stimulus, to an event, to something happening within the home. But let's go back to the other term, intelligence, quick-witted intelligence. We know what quick-witted means now, right? The ability to respond quickly and effectively where responding means to communicate or to react. But what does intelligence mean? And this was the definition I found: the ability to acquire and apply knowledge and skills. And again, I thought, wow, that's really interesting, that a smart home should be intelligent. It should actually be able to acquire new knowledge and new skills to make itself better over time. So what have we figured out? Let's review. A smart home should be quick-witted, which means it can respond quickly, which means it can communicate and react. And it should be intelligent, which means it should be able to acquire and apply new knowledge and skills. And I looked at this and I thought, oh my God, do you see it? Look what happens. It's a smart home. That's a bit cheeky, I know. But so we're starting to build a definition here. Yeah? Smart home, a home with the ability to acquire and apply knowledge and skills that can communicate and react quickly to do what? Well, this is where the dictionary didn't help me out. So we had to figure this out ourselves. And we've been doing that at SmartThings for the past 3 years. To do things that you can't do. To do things that you don't want to do. To save you time. To save you money, that's a big one. To prevent disasters, right? Stop the flood in the basement before it does damage. To make you healthier, right? Be able to tell you when the filters on the air conditioning system are no longer functioning correctly. To make you safer. And if I summarize all those things, I might get something like this: to solve real problems, conserve resources, and make life better. But I was still noodling this thing about, well, how does a smart home acquire knowledge and skills, right? Where those knowledge and skills involve both hardware and software. And that's when I realized that in this Internet of Things industry, as much as I hate the term, and in the smart home industry, we've got a bit of a problem. And that's a lack of standards. And by that, I do not mean a lack of people trying to define standards. There's an explosion of different standards bodies that are coming up now trying to define standards for the Internet of Things. But by that, I mean that we actually have a lack of adopted standards, a lack of real things that make it easy to acquire skills into the home by buying a new device, getting it connected, getting it installed, and having it work within this context of what we call the smart home. And I get asked all the time, Jeff, which standards are going to win, right? What should I make the bet on, right? I get asked this typically by device manufacturers, right? Where should we go? We've got, we want to build a connected pet feeder, right? Which standard should we use? Because we want to make the right bet. And my response is very simple. Right? I have no idea. What I do know is that the standards for the Internet of Things and the connected home are going to have certain characteristics. So let's look at a few of those. What are the things that are going to characterize the successful standards for the smart home? Mesh networking. It's pretty clear that we need a mesh networking standard that devices can make use of. Not everything can connect to Wi-Fi. You don't want everything to connect to Wi-Fi. And furthermore, what I really need is to have a battery-operated device where the battery lasts for about 10 years before I have to replace it, right? That's not Wi-Fi, right? But it could be mesh networking. TCP/IP, right? We have mesh networking standards today, but they're not IP-based, and that actually makes it more difficult to talk to those devices. It takes special radios, it takes special software, it takes gateways like the one my company produces. An IP-based world would simply be a bit easier in terms of integration. Both local and remote access. I need standards that tell me how to talk to the device locally within the home, but also how to talk to it remotely. And ideally, that should look very much the same. It should be nearly the same standard whether I'm local or remote. cloud federation. One thing that's becoming quite clear is that when we talk about connected devices, that how you connect to that device remotely may involve a manufacturer-specific cloud, and yet there are no standards for how I talk to, for example, the GE Wink cloud versus the Samsung cloud. Those are two entirely different things. We need standards for how to talk to these devices in the cloud and how to federate across all those things so that a single identity could actually talk across devices connected to different device clouds. We need an application layer or a semantic standard as well, right, that tells us exactly how to talk to the device. If I'm talking to a connected refrigerator, then at some level, all refrigerators need to speak the same language. Because as a developer, I don't want to write software for a specific refrigerator. I'd like to write software that works with any refrigerator, or turns on any light bulb, or locks any door. And platforms like SmartThings solve for that today, but we actually shouldn't need to. If we had the right standards, we wouldn't need to solve for that problem. Top to bottom security, right? The standards actually need to tell us how to deal with security, whether I'm accessing that device in the cloud or whether I'm talking to it on the local network. I need a way to secure that device and to control who has access to it, no matter where they are. And the device itself needs to understand the security model. It needs to be able to enforce security itself. Finally, the standards need to be supported by open source software, right? We don't want closed standards. We don't want proprietary standards. We want open standards, and that means open source standards, so that they can evolve and the community can participate in evolving those standards. So when I look at this, and I look at the landscape of standards that are being proposed or developed as we speak, a couple of them stand out. And I want to give a shout out to those two standards, or those two standards in development, because they're not standards yet. One is work being done by the Open Interconnect Consortium, the OIC. And the OIC is trying to define a set of standards that actually go from the local network, define the application or semantic standard, and go all the way to the cloud as well to deal with remote access, security, etc. What the OIC doesn't define, though, is the actual network layer, the actual transport. There's another group, though, called Thread, the Thread group, that actually does define that, and it defines it for a mesh network. It defines it based on 802.15.4, using TCP/IP or 6LoWPAN for the IP layer. And interestingly, these two standards have the potential, if they don't muck it up, they have the potential to actually be compatible, that a single device could actually be Thread compatible and OIC compatible and support both those standards at the same time. Really interesting work being done by these two groups. And as a disclaimer, SmartThings and Samsung are part of both of these two groups and fully supporting the work being done by these two groups. So back to my rant, my definitional rant. We talked about adding skills, and if we can get these standards resolved, it'll be easy to add new skills to a home in terms of hardware and software. The software is actually the easy part, right? Wiring up the world, that's the hard part. But it caused me to go look up the definition of skill as well. And I realized, and I'm not going to read this one to you, I realized, though, in reading the definition of skill, that when we talk about a skill, it's always talked about in human terms, right? The carpentry skill, the dancer, the cabinet maker. It's human skills, and that made me realize something important, that when we talk about the ability to acquire knowledge and skills, we need to make sure that we don't leave out the human, right? Because you're part of the smart home. You're going to live in it, right? And the ability for the home to take advantage of your skills is just as important as being able to take advantage of machine skills, of device and software skills. So when we look at that ability, we're really talking about human skills, devices and software, and ultimately machine intelligence. And when we look at human skills, there's two forms that those skills take. you, or the inhabitants of the home, but also professional services, right? People who are providing services to the home. That a smart home should actually be able to reach out and get professional services to come solve problems, because there are limits, right? If the smart home detects the flood under your kitchen sink, right, it can tell you about it, communicate. It can react quickly. It can actually shut off the water. If you've got a controllable water valve, we can shut the water off and prevent damage. But I can't actually fix the problem with the smart home. Well, at least not yet, right? I actually need to call the plumber and get the plumber out to fix the leak. And so our definition of the smart home includes these professional services. We believe that the smart home should actually transform the supply chain, the value chain for the home, so that at that point where you've had the leak, you've shut off the water automatically to prevent damage, right? That the next thing the smart home should do is to ask you if you want to call a plumber, and to find that plumber, schedule an appointment, and get them on the way to the house for you, right? So that they can solve the root cause of the problem. And when we look at devices and software and machine intelligence, these two things are very clearly going to ultimately come together in robotics, right? Machines that are capable of moving around the home and performing work on your behalf. We've got simple examples of this today with the robot vacuum cleaner, right? But we're going to see over the coming years an explosion of these types of devices as well. Not just devices that are fixed in the home and stuck in a wall somewhere, but devices that can actually move around, solve problems, and do chores or tasks on your behalf. So now we're finally getting to a more complete definition of the smart home. Let's look at it. A smart home is a home with the ability to acquire and apply knowledge and skills in the form of software and machine intelligence, standards-based connected devices, human support and professional services that can communicate and react quickly and automatically to solve real problems, conserve resources, and make life better. And so now, you know, when I say that at SmartThings, our vision is to make every home into a smart home, you know exactly what I mean. Thank you.
Jeff is going to stay on the stage. We're now switching into a panel discussion. So Jeff, CTO, SmartThings. Joining on the stage is George Yianni. George is Head of Technology Connected Lighting at Phillips. Most recently, George developed the Phillips personal lighting system, the Hue, which further enhances how consumers interact with their connected homes. The Hue light bulb contains software and a wireless radio which enables it to be controlled by user's smartphone, no surprise there, and create up to a mind-boggling 16 million colours from at home or over the internet. So that's George. Then we have Lyndon Tibbetts. Lyndon is one of the adventurous individuals working on IFT, a service enabling creative control over the devices and applications you use every day. And finally, moderating the panel is the fabulous Andrea Keay. She's the Managing Director of Silicon Valley Robotics, which is an industry group supporting the innovation and commercialization of robotic technologies. Andrea has an MA in human robot culture. How cool is that? She describes herself as a robot geek, a STEM educator, and filmmaker, having interestingly graduated as an ABC film, television, and radio technician in 1986. So we have Jeff, George, Lyndon, and Andrea.
Hello. Now I'm told you have to sit in that seat or your name will be wrong. Well, I'm looking forward to the discussion, having heard such an interesting definition of what an intelligent home will be. But to kick it off, let's just have a short recap of what you have each done till now, starting with Lyndon.
Sure. So my name's Lyndon Tibbetts. I'm the co-founder and CEO at a company called IFT. Stands for If This Then That. We help people make simple connections between the devices and services they use every day with the aim to give people creative control over those devices and services and how they communicate.
Jeff Hagins, founder and CTO of SmartThings, and for those, even though I just finished my talk, for those who don't know what we do, SmartThings provides a smart home platform that consists of our SmartThings hub and connected devices, but we're also compatible with lots and lots of off-the-shelf third-party devices for the home. And then finally, we are a platform for software developers that actually lets developers write software for the physical world in the form of what we call smart apps that can actually be installed and run as part of your smart home environment.
My name's Yianni. I'm the head of technology for connected lighting at Phillips. One of the most known products that I developed was Phillips Hue, which was the world's first internet-connected light bulb. We launched that 2 years ago, and since then we've been launching new products and services to really transform how consumers are using lighting in their homes.
And I'm Andrea Keay from Silicon Valley Robotics, which gives me a great overview of robotics generally. And I have to say, I don't think we're actually doing that well in terms of turning the house into the house robot that I often talk about. I think, for example, iRobot has shipped more than 10 million Roombas, making them the most widely distributed robot in the world. But I think they missed a golden opportunity to make them a little bit smarter and perhaps connected. What do you think is the most interesting opportunity for a connected device in the house?
So I think there's a lot of scope for really transforming how you do everyday tasks in your home by making normal products connected. But we really have to not lose sight of why we're doing this. There's a lot of technical possibilities to make any product connected, and every product you can imagine is becoming connected. But a lot of the cases, it's really missing a use case that adds value to the consumers. I work in lighting, so I'm going to say making lighting connected is actually the most valuable way you can make your home smarter, because actually every single room in your house and every single task you do in your house is currently supported by lighting. It's the only product in every room of your house you use every day, and we're missing its potential because all we do of it today is turn it on and off, and it could actually do a much better job of supporting actually anything you do in your house if you made it connectable and controllable and connected it to the right use cases.
I certainly agree that we need to focus on value add, right? And that there are a lot of, even with our platform, there are a lot of really, fairly silly examples of things that you can do with a home automation system. And I think that in order to be able to do those things, you first have to prove that you can do the value added stuff, right? You need to solve for use cases in areas like safety and security, peace of mind, energy savings. And if you do those things right, then you kind of earn the opportunity to do the silly things. But I think your example of the Roomba robot, right, is a great example where, we look at that and think, I wish that device, for example, was more connected, more controllable, but I also wish it had a camera on it, right? Because one of the things that I'd love to be able to do from a home security or a peace of mind perspective is if I'm not at home and something happens, and I get a notice telling me that there's a water leak somewhere, well, wouldn't it be nice to actually be able to put the robot to work, that vacuum cleaner to work, to send it to that place in the home and be able to put a camera on that and at least be able to see what's happening in my home right now, right?
Yeah, and I would have to say I think there's tremendous opportunities for individual devices, but I still think the biggest opportunity is when you start to think of those devices as individuals, a part of a much broader fabric. And those devices themselves, whether they're lighting or vacuums, don't necessarily have to be that smart. They just need to be connected, and they need to be open. And if you get that, and if you're able to tie those together with all the other things that are coming online in the home, and all the services and all the things that are currently on the internet, and you're able to offer that up for developers to actually build something interesting on top of, I think that's when we're going to see a lot of the really cool stuff. I mean, this is developers are tailor-made to find the cool use cases and real valuable things if you give them that platform.
It's a great point. I mean, we and I think we all kind of share the same belief, which is that we actually like to see a separation between the intelligence and the devices, right? It makes me a little bit crazy when I see, articles in the press that show the coffee pot talking to the microwave, right? That's actually not a world that I believe in, right? I believe in the separation of intelligence. I believe in, a layer, right, from an architecture perspective where that intelligence lives, where the devices are minimally intelligent. They have a minimum set of capabilities to be functional, right? And then you can apply intelligence across those devices. And by doing that, two of the things that you accomplish is that you minimize the cost of the devices, right? And you give consumers more choice in what intelligence they actually get to layer across their devices. They can do an IFT recipe. They can do a SmartThings smart app, right? They get to choose.
This is really leading into the area that you were talking about standards and interoperability. I would love to hear more about that, but I'm also very concerned about the layer just above that, where we're looking at social standards, because it's talking about privacy and data security. If you're extracting the intelligence from any discrete device, it starts to be hard to know where that intelligence is residing and who's got access to that and how you can identify within that. What do you think the challenges and the opportunities are?
I think the real challenge is being able to explain what you're doing with data in a way which everybody understands. And I think today it's a bit of a wild west out there. Everyone has their own privacy policies, which are huge, long legal documents that nobody reads. And most companies are doing things very responsibly. They're not using data in, irresponsible ways. They're not passing on to third parties that they don't control. But it's very, very difficult for a consumer to understand what they're getting. I think there's steps to be made in the industry as a whole to have language that people understand, or maybe standard approaches or certificates that this is a trusted party to really show how this data is being used. In the end, I think the other thing is that people have to do a better job of always making it opt-in. I'm not sure that it's acceptable for consumers that you buy this product and as a result, all these people get access to your data. I think there has to be a choice in order to get certain services which you can opt out of.
I also think that as an industry that we're not yet doing a great job in defining and sharing best practices from a privacy and a security perspective, right? That this is a whole new world where the privacy concerns and how you opt in, how you do things contextually from a privacy perspective, how you store data, right? If you're going to store consumer data in the cloud, how do you store it, right? Is the data, for example, is the data that you're storing from my home, is it natively anonymized in the cloud where it's stored, such that even if there were a breach of security, right, you wouldn't actually be able to determine from that data that it's mine, right? And simple things like that are, a best practice, I think, from an industry perspective, but we're not doing a good job of sharing those. And I think to the extent that we can do a better job there, it will stave off, governments deciding to regulate this stuff and to force those types of things on us as an industry.
And you're going to find the same issues as with devices, wearables, in portability as well, not being locked into any one platform. Lyndon, I think you've taken almost the inverse approach by providing a kind of a crowd platform.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I think I would say that the privacy and security of these systems is really just the base layer. It's a necessity. It has to be there. But I think to go above and beyond that, one of the things we talk a lot about at IFT is this idea of creative control. How do you give someone the level of control that they can start to be generative, that they can start to actually do something above and beyond? And to do that, you have to instill and really continuously reinforce confidence in what they're able to do with their devices, their services, and their information. An example I use often is, imagine if you have an IKEA dresser, and you've got Nike shoes and Levi's jeans. Right now, in the physical world, it would be unquestionable to imagine those companies have any say with what drawers you get to put those things in. You can lend your Nike shoes out to your friend and he can give them back. You know exactly where they are. In the digital place, in the internet, it's very, very different. Right now, there's a lot more control in the hands of companies, and they're doing deals and getting to say how you use these things together. And so what we're really after is how do we put that control back in the hands of people? How do we empower them with that creative control?
And yet, I think, you know, as an industry, we're going to find a balance here in terms of control, in terms of privacy and security. I mean, you know, there are lots of examples where, you know, for example, at some point in the future, right, when I buy a can of beans on the shelf at the grocery, right, you know, I wonder, is that can of beans going to be connected in some way, right? Am I going to have to opt into the, you know, to an end user license agreement at the point of sale, right, as I'm checking out, to say, yes, I'm accepting that this can of beans is actually connected and reporting. Now, that's a silly example today because, frankly, it would simply cost too much to connect that can of beans. But I think that problem's going to get solved, right? And when I can connect that can of beans for 5 cents, why wouldn't I, right? Because one of the things that falls out of that is that when there's a recall, right, and the manufacturer figures out that a big batch of those cans are contaminated with salmonella, right, then you're absolutely going to want that can of beans to be connected so that they know to tell you as the consumer, the person that bought it, not to eat it, right? So you know, am I concerned about privacy? Absolutely. Anybody who's not concerned about privacy is, you know, is kidding themselves, right? But do I want the safety that comes with the ability for a manufacturer to tell me that there's something wrong with the product and for that to translate into immediate action on my part not to eat that can of beans? I think we'll find that balance.
I think the mobility question is very important. As people are making actually everyday products you have inside your house, and you install them and actually don't think about them for maybe 10 years. I mean, a light bulb now lasts 15 years. Today, even with all the knowledge that we have, I cannot tell you how products will be connected 15 years from now. The only way we can actually address this is by making products upgradable and open and using standards so that consumers have the ability to keep using this infrastructure they're installing in the house going forward, with some confidence that they're not locked into a certain technology which is going to die out over the next years. I think that's a really important thing for these everyday products we're making connected.
Now, for all you say you can't really imagine what the next 10 or 15 years is going to bring, I think I have 3 people here who've done more imagining in that area than most other people. What do you imagine the next 5 or 10 years is going to bring in the smart home?
So I think it's really going to be that we find meaningful use cases for enough products inside the home, that we're going to have enough products inside the home that other ones will become connected to build these shared use cases across the home. Today, we're really trying to get the mass market penetration of these first connected products, which have to have use cases by themselves, and the network effect is for the lucky few. So I think we will actually see everything in the home becoming connected with great use cases, which I hope will be developed very openly, so the choice of applications you run in your home is independent from the devices that you choose to some extent. I think actually you won't begin to notice that the products stand alone. I think they will actually become more embedded into the fabric of the home. So it may even go to the point where, you know, you're not buying specific connected products, but you're more buying, you know, a house where it's built to be connected. Everything is just embedded in the fabric of the home. I think that's the way it will go if we look farther out. I really hope we manage to keep the separation between the applications, the functionality you run inside your home, and the actually devices in it.
I think, you know, I think in the next 5 to 10 years, we're going to start to question a lot of things that we've done traditionally. We're going to start to question things like, why are there light switches on the walls, right? Why is there a thermostat on the wall, right? As much as the Nest is a beautiful device, like why do I want a thermostat on the wall at all, right? If I can do something different. I also think we're going to start to see new sensor technology or existing technology applied in the form of new sensors. I think, you know, one of the areas that just is absolutely going to explode is the area of optical sensors. And I am careful to use that term versus camera, right? Because I say camera and immediately people think, my video streaming to the cloud, right? But when you say optical sensor, it has a different connotation, right? An optical sensor in a room could know, for example, whether a door is open or closed, or a window is open or closed, or who is in the room through facial recognition, right? Without necessarily having to have that data leave the home environment, and without having to use the traditional sensors that we use today for those things. An optical sensor, just like the human eye, can actually do a much better job of some of those things.
Yeah, and I see a big shift as I think we're really enamored now with just bringing these devices online. We're taking everyday objects, things that we've been around for hundreds of years in some cases, and we're starting them to connect them to the internet. And I think that's the big story right now. That's where Internet of Things comes from, and the focus on things. I think there will be a shift in focus from things to services. And I think that there's already lots of people saying that as well. But what I think that means is that there are entirely new modes of interaction with those services. Once it becomes clear that you actually can't even buy anything for the home that isn't already connected, including all the cans of beans, that shift in the importance of services, and Phillips and SmartThings both have fantastic services as well, really becomes apparent. And how do you interact with that service? Is that an app? Is that something like Siri? Is that gesture-based? And I think that's going to be the big story because that's really what's going to change things. That's going to make us start to change our behavior, or in some cases, keep doing the same behavior we're doing, just a whole lot more efficiently.
I think the things that will really affect the interaction, and I'm very pleased you raised that point, because once our homes start becoming intelligent and changeable, I don't know, I think that's going to change how we interact significantly anyway, but we're going to have to, and humans adapt and learn to operate with devices very quickly, but I think that's going to be a lot of dialogue there. But a point that was raised through that, as you said, products will have to become services, but we don't necessarily want to add more devices to houses that are already cluttered. We probably want to turn devices into the houses more so. And Japan has moved further down that pathway. There is a lot of prefabricated modular houses where everything is built in, and I believe you raised that point. What things would you most want to build in or work on, or which devices? And this is the question the last time I did a startup forum. Everybody in the room wanted to know what device you thought had the most potential for change.
It's a very good question. I think there is really a trend in some part of the world to really be able to embed it into the building materials. I think there is a lot of scope, I think, for lighting, because today we're bound to these light points, and there's absolutely no reason for the technology for that anymore. There's no reason your ceiling or your walls cannot be light points. You cannot change their color like it was wallpaper. I think these are really impactful things if you actually just distribute that into the building fabric. I would be amazed if that happens soon, even in the next 10 years in Europe and the US, just because of how slow the innovation is in building techniques and materials. Japan is a fascinating country in that they tear down their houses every 10 years and build new ones. So there the cycle is at least 10 times faster than it is in the rest of the world. So there these things are happening. And we work with Japanese building companies to do exactly this. So I think you'll see a lot of change there. Lighting, you will not have light bulbs in the future. It will just be part of the home, part of the infrastructure, part of the building.
I'm going to piggyback on that, because I wasn't going to focus on a single device, but a part of the infrastructure of the home, which is power distribution, right? I think power distribution has an enormous opportunity to change within the home and within commercial buildings as well. But today we wire a home in a very specific way, typically based on where we want lights, on where we want outlets, and where we want switches. And I think there's a huge opportunity to shift that so that power is accessible basically everywhere, where lighting is built into the home, and when I need to tap into power with a specific device, that I'm not limited to a specific place on the wall where I happen to have an outlet.
Yeah, and I'm going to take it in a little bit of a different direction, I think, and this might be truly 10 or 15 years out. I think there's this really interesting behavior around changing or modifying your environment based on specific needs. And these are small changes. So imagine as the sun rises and sets, you close and open different curtains, or as the temperature drops or rises, you change the thermostat in your house. But you also change your house when you have a guest over. You might convert the office and fold down the couch and have someone lay down. What if the whole home was reconfigurable? Well, what if you could add and remove rooms on a whim? I think that's very possible as well. It doesn't necessarily have to be static devices, static rooms.
Well, those were fantastic answers. I'm just really inspired by them. You've expanded hugely on what was actually a really tough question. And it brings us to the end of the panel. And I'll just conclude it by saying Amara's law says that we overestimate the impact of a technology in the short term, but vastly underestimate the transformative potential in the longer term. And thank the panelists.
Thank you.
Thank you.